All right, hello again, everyone. Welcome to Black Men Let's Talk, where we talk with some of the more influential men of color in Sacramento who are helping to create positive outcomes, create change, undo our image that has been tarnished, and some of the making some of the wrongs right in this community. So it's a place where, as you all know, Black men get to come together and just talk about our story, our journey, and our hopes and plans for the future. So with that being said, I'm super honored to have Daryl Roberts join us today. I've had a chance to see Daryl's work from afar and the work of the Roberts Family Development Center, and just honored to have him on the show today. So Daryl, welcome, my brother.
Demetrius, thank you for inviting me, bro. Thank you.
Excellent. Perfect. So Daryl, let's get started for those who do know you and maybe the very few who probably don't on this show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, the neighborhood you maybe primarily work in, live in, any organization that you represent, and really what drew you to community service.
Pretty broad topic. So start off, been in Sacramento, came here as a graduate student 40 years ago, and have never left. Never thought I'd be in Sacramento as long as I have been. I thought it would be a pit stop on the way, and it has turned into my life. Yeah. So started working in the community. I'm getting a little feedback. I don't know. Is that I'm not having it anymore, but I had it at first. Yeah, I started in the community. Work probably after I'd been between the Department of Education and as state capitol, first as a graduate fellow and Senate fellow, and then later on as a staffer, and came to the community of Oak Park, and that's kind of where I landed and where my first professional work started. Initially started in economic development since that was part of my training in college and some of my work at the Capitol. But it eventually evolved into more community-based work, working with the Sacramento Urban League. Before I did that, I was with Superior Valley. I always have to give Hal Brown and Daryl Freeman their props for giving me a chance as a young brother coming from the Capitol. I think I was referred by Sam Walton, and sometimes I mention names just because those are the people who were influential and have been influential in my life. The opportunity that they gave me led me to Oak Park, where I met the president of the Urban League at that time, George Dean, who talked me into and gave me an opportunity to work some of youth programs. And that's kind of where I began doing work in the community of Oak Park. The neighborhood of Oak Park saw me develop over almost a 10-year period, doing work for the Urban League, later on being the original executive director at St. Hope Academy when Kevin first started it. Kind of proud of that work that we did when he started St. Hope Academy and the wonderful things he's done over the years. Some of them I didn't agree with or understand, but that was his choice, and he's seemed to have done quite well by it. Later on, working with the Salvation Army, I think, Demetrius, you and I first bumped into family, Demond Stone being a player at the Salvation Army and Oak Park Summer League. And back in those days, that's what we created as a vehicle to get young people, keep them safe out of the streets. And at that time, that was our say no to drugs, say yes to the Oak Park Summer Basketball League. That was kind of a little slogan. And we used that. I had a friend, Charles Kidd, who I still have as a friend, who assisted me in helping develop that into one of the largest summer and year-round basketball programs in the region. At one time, I think we had almost 500 kids, young men and young women, from elementary through high school playing basketball between Sac High, Salvation Army, Cal Middle School. And we had traveling teams that developed from that. And you have some pretty good ball players that came out of that, those years of working, some pretty good leaders, some pretty good young people who developed, both young men and young women developed based on the opportunities they had. And some of them was not just because of sports, but also some of them who learned how to do organizational development, how some of us, we have certain city and state officials who started around the Salvation Army and Oak Park Summer Basketball. They learned how to do the scoreboard and how to be the team organizer. And they learned through that opportunity that was given to me that we gave to young people. And I think that's been my trademark in terms of trying to give others opportunities. After leaving the Salvation Army, I went to work with Father Keith B. Kinney Elementary School, again in Oak Park. Murdy Shelby was a principal at that time. And she and her husband, James, have always been influential in my life as well as the life of my wife. But Murdy was the principal and gave me the opportunity to develop other skills. So I think I understood about programming through the Urban League and then through the Salvation Army, even St. Hope Academy. But I think Murdy gave me an opportunity to develop other skills around leadership, about development, around really how do you get things done. One of the things that Murdy was good at is giving me her vision and allowing me to go about the business of making a vision happen. So whether it be acquiring more property at the back of the school, getting portable buildings in the back of the school, the property line is still expanded because of our work together, and the portable buildings that are in the back still are in the back because of the work we did then. The new parking lot, which actually is an old parking lot now. In those days, it was a new parking lot. It was done during that time. And those are things that Murdy allowed me to do, working through some of the city officials as well as some of the city agencies and school district. And she allowed me to figure out how to get things done. So negotiating with city officials was part of what I learned. Not being afraid to ask for money for our community was one of the things that I learned. And I think some people at times when they don't know me don't recognize that that's what I think is missing in the equation right now. Our inability to get resources for our community that to benefit our community. And we have the resources, but we don't always have the political will to make it happen. And for me, that's kind of the part where I think we have to be better at. We have to be better advocates for resource development in our community. And that kind of is the genesis from which I do the work today.
Excellent. Thank you, Daryl. Daryl, you probably have been instrumental in getting some of the programs started that myself and my cousin Damon and others in the community that have certainly benefited from. So I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, shout out to Damon Stone. I missed his heyday when he was really cutting his teeth and getting to be well known on the Sacramento courts. I think I was away in the military at the time, but
yeah.
Yeah, it's a great kid.
Yeah.
Daryl, you mentioned the political will that we sometimes lack that helps us get things done. Do you think, or in your opinion, do you think that if more African Americans from our community sought roles in politics or became actively involved in politics, that would help alleviate some of that? Or what are your thoughts around that?
I think that's part of it. I think the other part is a willingness of our community to hold folks accountable. And when I say hold accountable, not just say to them, you do, but assist them in doing, and thereby becoming accountable ourselves to making sure things happen. We can elect the council member ourselves, and they can't even look like us. But if we don't give them an agenda to follow, if we don't give them things that we expect for the 4 years while they're elected, it's tough, because you're basically saying you're often are frustrated because you're thinking, why aren't they doing? Sometimes they don't know. The reality is they can only live in one part of the district at a time, one address. That's the rule, and that's part of it. The other real part is our districts are a little more spread out than we probably think about. When I first started, Oak Park was primarily District 5, and now District 5 is Oak Park and part of Franklin and part of South area. And, it's been gerrymandered to a point now where you got to recognize that whoever is elected in those spaces, in those districts, have more responsibility in just one neighborhood. I think in my heyday, Oak Park and Curtis Park were the primary beneficiaries of whatever happened in District 5. Well, things are spread out now. I live now in Del Paso Heights. I live in North Sac, and we serve families in Del Paso Heights, but the council member represents Woodlake, North Sac, Del Paso Heights. It represents Hagenwood. It represents other parts of of our communities that are there, and those are different communities having different needs. And if those of us who are or think of ourselves as being politically astute are not recognizing we got to stay engaged, we have to have more people staying engaged, by the way, but we have to hold them accountable to doing the work that we call them to do. And that can be as simple as taking care of trash pickup to as complicated as coming up with an economic development plan that benefits our community in a different way. One that allows us to be able to say that, hey, we require you as an elected official to stand up for us and fight, and we will fight with you. Most effective neighborhoods and communities are present at city council, and they're not just present there once in a while. They have a constant presence there. And that's an interesting observation when you go on a regular basis. At one point, maybe, probably 3 to 5 years ago, I was fairly visible at a regular presence at city council, which gave me the chance to get to know people who, as we began organizationally growing, that was one of the reasons that it happened, because I knew people and I spoke to them and they spoke to me, and I saw them before they went on to the dais, and they saw me as they came off the dais. And it's just important that we recognize that that's the reality of relationship building that brings about political power.
Yeah, that's so well said, Daryl. And you're right. I think, we can rest assured that because we have council members that are representing multiple neighborhoods, we can probably say with somewhat certainty that those other neighborhoods are definitely making sure that their expectations are being met. So, yeah, that probably speaks to pretty much any type of relationship. If you're even in your interpersonal relationship, if you're not telling that person what you expect, then they're just going to end up taking you for granted.
Well, and it's just that people have a tendency to do what needs to be done right in front of them. And sometimes right in front of them gets the attention. And it's not always the squeaky wheel that gets the most attention, but that space that is willing to speak up about his priorities and his needs have a better opportunity to receive the resources that they need. And that's it. That's just how that works. That's the process that we're a part of. That's part of democracy, but that's also part of our community challenges. How do we do that better?
Yeah, that's spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, Daryl, more along more broader terms. What would you say? What would you say are your hopes and concerns for your family, your community, and just this country as a whole?
Okay. I'm a husband and a dad and a grandfather. So, I got a few thoughts in terms of personal development as a husband. I think, my next 3 to 5 years as I start kind of phasing out of Roberts Family Development Center is the recognition that I got to figure out how to be a better partner to my wife. Making sure that I'm acknowledging her needs, her desires, her wants. Where we end up living, where we live in North Sac right now, is that where we're going to stay? Got to make sure I'm attuned to what she's saying as well, making sure that I'm listening, because that's important to me. Also, how to be a more effective communicator to her, so that she recognizes some of my wants and desires as well. As a dad, I try to stay in touch with my daughter, my son-in-law. They live a wonderful life. Son-in-law's in the military. She is a military wife, but she's also a substitute teacher outside of Chicago. And we have a 13 and 10-year-old grandgirls. So, want to make sure that the world is better for them. I get concerned about, some of the challenges we have in the streets, because those challenges don't occur just in our neighborhood, but sometimes those challenges that we see in our neighborhood occur in other neighborhoods as well. So, you know, the weekend of, I think it was 4th of July, I think, or one of those holidays where there was this shooting in Chicago, you know, outside of, it was one of the parades that was going on. And, you know, somebody, snipers, you know, shot some people. Well, it just so happens my son-in-law was planning to take the girls there that morning. For whatever reason, they weren't able to make it. So when I first heard that, just check in and say, hey, we okay? Well, yeah, they were okay, but the reality is they could have been in the line of fire had they gone to that event. Well, so often that occurs in our community where we hear something happen and we recognize that we could have been victims in those moments. And luckily we haven't, you know, that hasn't necessarily touched as close personally for me, although, you know, I got to admit a young, one of my favorite cousins back, oh man, 40 something years ago was killed by the Cherry Hill police down in Southern California. So police violence, you know, police brutality became a personal issue in my family, and, you know, trying to deal with those emotions. I think one of your questions asked me about the emotions that are, you know, that I think about as we talk about our history as a people, our position as we are today. I hadn't had a question that talked about my emotions, but quite honestly, those emotions are there, and and they get pricked again, you know, every time something occurs, and you're reminded just how vulnerable we are as people, but also how resilient we are, because, you know, even though we talk about what has happened, we continue to do, and we don't become frozen in time or frozen in a moment or unable it does not enable us from living and thriving, you know, and that's the important part. So I'm hopeful that regardless of what's going on in today, that my grandgirls, my son-in-law, and my daughter, and my wife, and we have, you know, a fruitful existence down the line. And that gives me hope that, you know, the things that we do today have an impact on that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I had some mic trouble there.
Huh?
Yeah, Daryl, you mentioned that July 4th. I remember that. I remember that the day that happened.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think we're so prone, or I
Yeah.
wouldn't say prone, but we're so accustomed
Custom.
to violence now that, you know, until
Yeah.
someone brings up, yeah, remember the Chicago shooting? Oh yeah, that
Oh,
was
yeah.
another one.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what it's become, you know, and that's the
Yeah.
challenge. It's like people's responses to their, you know, mental challenges and emotional challenges today are being responded to by violence, and that violence is so the emotional moments can be temporary. The violence is permanent, and I don't necessarily know if people recognize that the violence is permanent. You know, we see things happen in our streets, in a parking lot at a football game, totally away from a football game a couple of weeks ago. And it's a shame because that violence offset a beautiful evening of community spirit and a great football game at Grand High School. And in that parking lot, away from the football game, involving no student from Grand High, by the way, that was a current student at Grand High who that incident became what we talked about, what we focused on, rather than the fact that we had a wonderful evening at Grand High School. And even though they lost a football game, nobody could walk away upset about the outcome of the game, other than shucks, the Pacers lost. And then when to turn on, for me to turn on the news the next morning, because I wasn't clued in that night to recognize that occurred. You know, it's like, dang. You know, that happens far too often in our community. And to be honest with you, that's the very same night there were other shootings that we didn't focus on that occurred both in Oak Park and off of El Camino in Sacramento. That's when you recognize some things has to be done. But also that's when you recognize what we've done in the past has not paid off, or still the lack of what we've done we did not do in the past, or not doing those things in the past that we should have done is what's causing this problem today. You know, I'm a big advocate and big proponent to investing in our youth. And sometimes when people ask me why is it happening today, because we didn't invest in them in the past. And our decisions, not to our political decisions, not to spend resources to keep our kids out of trouble, out of stinking thinking, out of not learning values about life. Our lack of investment in those things that will prevent that are now paying off constant conversation around violence. And that for me is the real.
Yeah, that's so well said there, and I agree. We don't invest often enough in the treatment or in the prevention and being upfront. We're spending so much more money now trying to fix the problem, and treatment and locking up, which is a whole nother story, bringing in a whole lot more money. So you're spot on. And I'm so glad you brought up the game the other week. I was at that game as well. First of all, just the way the community turned out, I would say even on the Elk Grove side, it was a fun night. It was an amazing game.
It was.
I think that's number one. The sportsmanship on the field. And similar to you, I did not even know about it because it was such a fun night, such a fun game until I got up the next morning and my wife said, "Did you see anything in the parking lot? The shooting at the game?" And I didn't
unless you're on that side of the parking lot, you didn't see it because it happened in such a way that it was kind of shielded from everybody. So for us, for me, I was on the South Avenue parking lot side near the tennis courts. So I just went straight home, got home and kissed my wife and got in bed, and wasn't worried much about anything else other than dang, Grant lost that game. But it wasn't a they got killed or
it was a great game,
super game, and all those things happen. But the reality is that some young person lost their life that night, and that young person's losing their life is a permanent result of somebody's temporary response to whatever happened at that moment. Can't be that big a deal. Couldn't be that big a deal. Not to cause somebody's life to be lost. So those are the moments that it tells me we have to do better as a community. And I'm one of those political animals who say I get involved in politics because I think that's how you can make things happen. I've been doing that for years. But I'll also tell you that I've become really aware that not enough is being done. And we're fortunate at Roberts. You work with the IYT. There are other groups out there that are doing work, but there needs to be more. And trust me, there's not enough. And I don't care what anybody says. If you serve 100, we serve 100, and there's 1,000 kids. That's 800 kids not involved with something. And until we recognize those 800 kids deserve something the same way the other 100 that you're serving, under 100 I'm serving, deserve quality adults in front of them, providing them with direction and guidance and mentoring and tutoring. Those are the things that saved us back in the day. For me, I can tell you they did. So I'm here as a result of people who mentored me and tutored me, programs that were there both in New Orleans, where I grew up, but also in California, Los Angeles, where I finished high school, and throughout. And then when I came to Sacramento, as I told you, I tried to create those environments. And I've created those environments for the last 21 years, my wife and I, through Roberts Family Development Center. And that's what it's been about. It's really been about serving young people and their families. Because I think it's important that we recognize you can't try, you can do all you can do with a child, but the way to have a lasting impact is to figure out ways to have an impact on their families. Get mom and dad to buy into the values you're trying to feed into their child. Make sure that you understand the values that mom and dad have, because sometimes you can support them, or sometimes you might assist them in thinking about things differently. Because remember, if we're talking about lack of investment, for me, in our city, lack of investment has been almost that way for 25 plus years. 30 plus years ago, we started talking about gang problems here in Sacramento. So I'm going to tell you that's how long I've been at it. That's how long I've been involved in it. I was doing Salvation Army 30 years ago. So when I tell you that we were talking about say no to drugs, it was because we had gang activity. Yes, we had gang activity in Oak Park in those days. I'll make you laugh. I recall getting T-shirts donated by Terry Tower, with a member of the Sacramento Kings back in the day. Terry donated red T-shirts to us, and those T-shirts came out. And everybody said, "Oh, Mr. Roberts, we can't wear those T-shirts. They were so cool." Oak Park Summer League T-shirts. I'm sorry, we gonna wear these shirts. And I told everybody who needed to hear, this is our game, baby. This is what we gonna do. Now, let me be honest with you. I sure did get some of the fellas in the neighborhood to recognize why we had red shirts. And I sure did tell them, I'm not dumb. I know what I got to do to protect my kids.
Yep.
Bro, do me a favor. Recognize their red shirt say Oak Park Summer League on it. Sponsored by Terry Tyler. Literally had that way. And that's what we were wearing. But that was gang activity back then. So it's not like it's brand new to us. We invested in those days in that. We tried to get the city 25 years ago to come up with a gang tax to address gang activity. And it was not even put on the ballot. And people don't realize that's where problems exist. So 25 years later, the kid who was 5 or 10, who's 35 right now, if they didn't get involved with Oak Park Summer League or something like that, IYT wasn't here just then, you know? So, and people got to recognize that's the challenge. That I'm thankful for the organizations that are opening up today to get involved, the individuals who are doing things. I will not call out individuals by name on the show, only because I'll certainly offend somebody by not saying, why didn't he say my name? It is because there's
Right.
so many who are out there trying to do the work now. Let me tell you something. They weren't out there 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And many of them saw what was needed 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and began thinking about that. And luckily for us, those are the people who are now leading the charges for their organizations today. Good thing. We have to support them, but we also have to support others. We have to give them a chance to raise workers in the work, to do the work with the young people who need to be touched. We need to invest in them. We need to invest in them organizationally. And yes, I said invest in them because it's those people and those organizations in the toughest neighborhoods that can change things. You have to excuse me. I am not of the opinion that government can change things. It's people that change things. You know,
Yep.
You alluded to the fact we spend an awful lot of money locking up folks.
Yep.
And I may not be the biggest. I'm not the biggest police hater. I'm not. I recognize the role that police play, but I'll also tell you the police's role could be more defined, allowing the community itself to take on those things before we have to call the police, before we have to, because some of that is about mental health, some of that is about economics, some of that is, so if you can give a kid a job, or you can start identifying young people who are not handling themselves well and not making good choices. See, if I'm working with a kid who's in 6th or 7th grade and they're making bad choices, how do we stop them to understand? How do we connect with them to make them understand that's a bad choice so that they can see their choices will get them in trouble? Their choices will hurt somebody else. And whether it be that you push somebody down because they're smaller than you, your choice to push that kid down is getting you in trouble. It's causing you to lose some valuable quality time. Instead, you're getting punitive time. You're being taken away from program. You're not being allowed to participate, but do that early. Talk to them about those choices. Give them mentors. Give them tutors. Identify if they need some other support. So if they need counselors, if they need somebody to have regular lunch with them, they need a lunch buddy. Let's figure out ways to create that. And those things that are happening now are trying to do all those things, you know, in terms of making sure you incorporate tutoring, you incorporate mentoring, you incorporate, even for those who say they're incorporating policy development, they're doing that with young people, trying to teach them how to better advocate for themselves. I'm part of the Sacramento Kid First Coalition, and I have seen the development of those young leaders and have marveled at them. And honestly, I've taken a step back because I recognize they are the reason that things are beginning to happen in that area. So it's like, it's their turn. You know, I have no problem telling you, I am not a kid anymore. I'm not a young professional anymore. You know, and some people say, Mr. Roberts, you're so youthful. Yeah, but I got 62 years plus of being youthful. And you just got to recognize, I know the real. You know, and I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to be in those spaces where others are now. I'm not trying to, and I don't even feel a need to be in those spaces because there are people in those spaces. The opportunity to talk about the positives that are happening in Sacramento is because they are doing those positive things as well. And no longer can you just point to one organization or two organizations. There are multiple organizations out there doing good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that. There are a lot of organizations, and and I'm not privy to everything that goes on between organizations, but just the way nonprofits work and fund development work, sometimes we're kind of pitted against each other, whether externally or internally. But I'm so glad you mentioned. I completely agree. There may be one thing that this organization doesn't have that resonates with this kid, but this organization does.
Yeah.
And as long as we're pouring into all of those organizations who have that kid or those kids that identify with that mission,
That's it.
yeah, we all can provide something.
I think what people get caught up in is the lack of resources. We don't talk about that. Limited resources cause that competition, right? So I'm going to tell you that's why I'm supportive of. I'm on your show, so I might as well talk about Measure L, the Dedicated Youth Fund. Supported because that's $10 to $12 million available for youth activities that are done by both city agencies, nonprofit agencies, and others working with our kids. And see, you hit it on the nail on the head when you said some organizations reach that kid, some organizations reach that kid, some other organizations reach that kid. See, not one of us reaches across the board. I will tell you, not every kid fits the model of a kid in Roberts Family Development Center. And what I say by that, over time, you recognize I don't want to be there every day. Well, that's what we're requiring you. We need the doses of positive attention in your life. We need to see you Monday to Friday. We do. We need to have you in program from 2:30, 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And that's because we have a structure in place. Not every kid wants to do that. Not every parent wants a child in that. And you have a right not to do that. But I'll tell you, there's somebody else who might fit your needs. Maybe my baby only wants to deal with sports. Okay, there's a little league basketball program. There's something going on. There's a music program. Or excuse me, there are not enough music programs. There are not enough spoken word programs, but they are there. Those are options that your child can know about. It's on us to make sure that the funding that allows us to expand those services. So there's enough music programs, there's enough arts programs, there's enough spoken word programs, there's enough sports programs, both in school as well as out of school. Because every kid is not going to be good enough to play for Grant High School, but every kid who has an interest in football should be allowed the opportunity to try to play. You know, and they don't have to play flag. They don't play tackle. They can play flag. They can be a cheerleader. They can be in the band. They can be, in the drum line. There's a lot of things that we should make sure children have options, because the truth is, in those neighborhoods where we don't talk about these problems, they have those options. They are there.
Yep. You're right.
You and tell me what you want to tell me. I know that. I know I go certain parts of Sacramento County or the region, and I can tell you in those neighborhoods, they have options. Options.
Yes.
So when you tell me there are options available to those kids, when kids choose not to be involved in those options, in some cases, I think a child is making the choice. But that's also a child, quite honestly, who has the options of maybe having some mental health support that they might need. And see, and that's, to me, is the difference. We need to have options in our community. We need to be given an opportunity to have options. That's where elected officials come in. That's where fighting for resources come in. I'm one of those who remembers, and I've been around long enough to remember Bonnie Pennell and Sam Pennell as city council members. And I remember how they fought for Meadowview, how they fought for South Sac. And I don't care what you tell me about Bonnie and Sam. The two of them together caused more positive development to happen in that area than any place else other than Norton Natomas, which happened because of the economics of growth happening in Natomas. In South Sacramento, yes, there is economic growth, but the things that you see around the Meadowview community and those parts were because of political decisions that favored the community. And in many cases, the community hadn't been pushed out, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, people still have their homes. And it's just, people don't talk about it that way, but yeah, it is. You can still have that economic growth without having to push people out, and that's sometimes because you have vacant land to do it on, sure enough. But the other part is making sure people are aware of what's coming up and what's coming down the pipe. And that's where it happens. And that's how it's happened. That's how elected officials can assist us in making sure that we're aware of what's coming down the pipe, the projects that are coming along, and how it will benefit our community short term and long term.
Yeah, you're spot on. Hey, elections coming up. Measure L, everyone. Definitely pay attention, read up, educate yourself on it.
Yeah, and people, I'll take a moment to talk about kind of a dark cloud for us. We got attacked pretty good 3 years ago when Measure L came out. We were one of those vocal organizations. I was a vocal individual around Measure L, and we were attacked because when we grew as an organization, we didn't have the fiscal space We didn't have the fiscal strength that we should have had, the foundation that was needed. So we made some mistakes. Those mistakes came out in a lawsuit that was happening. We resolved the lawsuit. We took care of it, but it was a stain that people used politically against us and used against Measure, at that point, Measure G. And that was what caused the loss, the surprising opposition from some people who are friends, who right now today support Measure L, by the way. You know, that also was the reason. But quite frankly, a lot of what happened back then for us caused Measure G to lose. I've been personally a little more quiet on the Measure L front, first of all, because I have young people in our organization who are Shelby Oliphant specifically, who have been our organizers, who've been doing the work for us organization. I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to be that, because I recognize even when my name is mentioned, a reporter who doesn't like us or doesn't like Measure L will quickly say Daryl Roberts. Oh yeah, I remember back in the day. And I'm sure they'll say that for the rest of my life. That'll be part of what'll have to be, you know, the little line that somebody will use. But I'm okay with that, because that was because we were fighters for what we feel was correct and what was right. And I believe today the right thing for the city to do is invest more in young people. Invest more in young people.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Darren. Thank you for providing that clarification and just giving a different side than other people have probably heard or have read about.
It was a tough moment for me, because I was advised by our organization attorney. You don't want to keep litigating that lawsuit that occurred. You resolved it. You got slapped on the wrist, and that's what it was. A waking up call. We now have a full-time fiscal director on site doing the work that needs to be done, along with an accounting organization, as well as auditors. So we have those things in place now. So we are a strong organization for it. But yeah, we probably were one of those who in some ways benefited from resources being given to us, but the problem was we didn't have the right foundation, strong enough foundation in place, fiscal foundation specifically. I learned from that. I also will tell you, I talk to others who are doing the work now and say that to them now. Make sure you're taking care of your fiscal house. It's important that you not only just have an accountant, make sure that accountant understands all the rules of nonprofit work at the $1 million level, at the $500,000 level, the $1 million level, the $1.5 million level. All those rules different. $2 million. That means you bringing in $2 million, audit every year. Every year. Somebody said, Ms. Roberts, at $1 million, you should be auditing every year. If that's what you can afford to do it then. But whatever you're doing, and just do it and understand that it's not something that you can put to the side. It's something you can worry about later. Because watch this. I literally pushed some things aside because I was concerned about serving. And you can be concerned about serving, but you're not concerned about taking care of the accountability part. That's when you run into problems. We ran into problems. We dealt with them. We got through it. And frankly, Demetrius, I will tell you, COVID was, for organizationally, COVID happened, and it allowed people not to focus on that, but focus on our ability to serve. So we started doing the things that we normally did doing forever. We would just focus on because we were serving. Vaccination clinics, food distribution, being on Zoom with our kids. Those are just things that we did. And people began focusing on that. So the negatives went away for the most part. Occasionally, a reporter who decides that he doesn't care for, me or the organization, or doesn't like the thought of investing in our young people the same way I think we should do. They'll bring that up. But other than that, that's not heard anymore. And we're good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it. I myself personally am happy to hear that, hear your side of the story, and have the chance that we chat, because just as I haven't been doing this nearly as long as you have, Daryl, but just in 2 years of leading an organization of Big Brothers Big Sisters, we were challenged with staff. There were so many things we had to do that putting a finance person in place is not because we didn't want to or trying to hide something. It's because I'm focused on this program and serving these kids. And honestly, oftentimes we don't know what we don't know.
Well, that wasn't my bailiwick. That wasn't how I got involved. I got involved in service. I got involved at the Urban League. My first thought at the Urban League was having a speakers bureau for kids. I mean, literally, I was trying to figure out how do I bring some positive role models into the high schools at Burbank, at Sac High. That's what I did. That's what I focused on. See, but I didn't have to run that organization. Same thing with the Salvation Army. I go to Salvation Army, or let's say St. Hope Academy. I didn't have to worry about finances. That was Kevin's job. So I worried about developing the organization. When I went to Salvation Army, I worried about, focusing the organization on more kids because I had a small group of kids that were there. And like I tell you, at some point we had 500 plus kids connected to Salvation Army doing the work under the banner of Oak Park Summer Basketball League, sponsored by the Salvation Army. Well, those are things I did under service. Now, honestly, I wasn't as aware of the fiscal ramifications of what I was doing, except my boss said to me, Daryl, you have a budget of $150,000, $200,000 that pays for your people. Anything beyond that, you have to raise it. So I knew that if I wanted to take my kids to a tournament, I had to figure out a way to pay for it. See, that was my fiscal lessons early on. Now you can do that, but it's nobody who's going to tell you all of it until you have to learn it. And sometimes we step into spaces. So I go from the Salvation Army to the school district, which certainly didn't bother me about the monies that we spent at Keith B. Kinney, because that was Mrs. Shelby's responsibility. My responsibility was to find resources to do the things that we wanted to do at Keith B. Kinney. So all I did was then finding resources for those add-on things. Not until I went to the Roberts Family Development Center and I became the point person for everything did I understand, the enormity of the responsibility. So when people call me and say, I want to start a nonprofit, I say, stop. Are you sure you want to do that? Yeah. Okay, cool. So let me tell you what we're going to talk about, how enormous that responsibility. Let's talk about that first.
Yep.
If you're willing to do that, then you're willing to take on the responsibility of running a nonprofit. But if you think that it's going to be all gravy and easy, and it's going to do that, now, especially not if you're going to grow. Because the minute you grow, the minute you begin pulling other people into it, and you have to pay people after a while to hold them accountable, because people volunteer only so long before you recognize you have wore them out. The Big Brothers Big Sisters, I know you ran into that. People were not willing to volunteer that time because after a while, it became real difficult. IYT and Roberts Family Development Centers, their payrolls have had to grow over the years to do the work that we organizationally have to do, as others have. But that's just the real, and people don't recognize that. And unless you are fortunate enough to have that as a background, and most people who do nonprofit work don't have fiscal as a background, you have to understand it is a necessary, not only evil, a necessary responsibility. Your fiduciary responsibility is a first calling, not a second calling. It's a first calling. It's an equal calling to your service responsibility. It really is. And for many of us, that's where it's like, oh man, this is a difficult thing to say I want to do. Because once you start thinking about it, it's not as easy as it looks. You mean I'm not going to just be on TV talking about all the great things I'm doing? Well, no, that might happen maybe once a year, maybe twice a year if you're lucky, if you're doing it well enough, if you learn how to have a relationship with media members and, they see the work you're doing, or somebody else talks about what you're doing, you might get that attention. More than likely, like most organizations, people won't know what you're doing for years. And you can sometimes become resentful. And you alluded to that a minute ago too, about not so much the competition, but recognizing some people getting more attention than I get.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the truth is that's going to happen. And you have to understand that's going to happen because that's just part of it until you prove yourself. And sometimes it takes years and years and years. And sometimes people who are doing this work, people recognize them and say, man, wow, you just started. No, man, I started 10 years ago. I'm glad you're on the scene to you, but I've been doing this for years.
For years.
I laugh with folks when they say, Mr. Robert, you've been at how long have Robert? 21 years. Oh, 21 years. Man,
yeah.
You ain't as young as I thought. I said, I didn't tell you I was young. That's what you told yourself. But the reality is that's those of us who do this work like you have that youthful enthusiasm. And you have to have that youthful enthusiasm when you work with young people. Young staff members both drive me crazy, but also keep me energized. The kids, there are moments when I can almost be frustrated with them, but I realize, stop, that's not your role to get frustrated with them. That's somebody else's role who gets paid to do that every day, because you don't have that role every day anymore.
Right.
And that's how it changes over time. People ask me, what's the difference between now and 20, 30 years ago? I'm not in the same role today. I am removed. My responsibility is to make sure we have resources to do the things we say we're going to do. That's my job. I have others who have the responsibility of day-to-day work. I think the challenge for most of us is trying to find people we feel are as committed to us doing the work as we did it, because it's different now.
Yeah, you're spot on. That's the challenge that a lot of us are facing.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, some of it is setting realistic expectations, but the other part is setting expectations. And everybody doesn't want to meet those expectations. Well, maybe you shouldn't be in that space where you're asking us to pay you to be in. Because I'm paying you to be in that space. I have an obligation to have an expectation of you because you should have an expectation of the kids, and expectations don't happen unless there's some consistency across the board. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you're spot on there. I think that's the challenges we all. Yeah, I still consider myself fairly young, but
Hmm.
even at 52,
Hmm.
I'm looking for people who have the same passion and commitment and accountability that I had when I was
Yeah.
30 or 35, because I
Yeah.
am similar to you. I have younger
Yeah.
grandkids,
Yeah.
but it's like,
Hmm.
I don't have the energy nor the time, nor do I have the relatability that I
Yeah.
still had
Oh yeah.
with
I know.
kids.
And that. So honestly, Demetrius, my role with the kids, and they will tell you, Mr. Roberts comes in and gives us fist bump or high five. That's
Yep.
when I see them, because and I always tell them, let me look in your eyes. So I like to see how you looking. Which no. I mean, I'll stay right there until I need to see you. I need to look at you. Well, that's just my way of connecting. But that's my role, because I'm not going to see them but for a few minutes. Truly, if I'm at
Right.
Grant High School, I'm at Allen Chapel AME, where our paces moving forward, our kids are at. I see them for that 2 hour window when I'm hanging out there, when the guest speaker's there, and I want to hear the guest speaker, because I'm always amazed at the people who say exactly what I know needs to be said, and I never
Yep.
prep them. I don't prep
Mm,
speak. It's funny. I
yep.
kind of laughed with you when you sent me the questions, because I asked Kathy the question. It's probably more just to see what you were going to say when you send me the
Yeah.
question. Those are questions, but I got to admit to you, part of it was made me think about the work. Made me think about,
Mm,
the questions you're asking me now are things that I answer that every day, all day. But the mere
yeah.
fact that I had to read them and think about them in a different way made me
Wow.
recognize, man, you've been doing this a while. I was
Wow.
laughing with my wife, because she said, this morning when we were talking, she said, "So what you doing next?" Now, she's never said that to me. What you doing next? Because she has heard me say 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. I keep saying that because I think people need to recognize I can't do this forever. I'm going to tell you, part of it is I know it's time for us to begin thinking about who's next at Roberts Fan Development Center. What's my role? My next role, I laugh and tell the board, is like CEO emeritus. Because one of the things you recognize as a nonprofit leader, you don't really have a nest egg, but you've been doing this for a while. But the truth is, you still need to figure out how to bring resources into your household so that your wife doesn't leave you, your husband doesn't leave you, your significant other doesn't leave you because of lack of finances.
Right.
So I laugh about that. And so as my wife says that to me, we talk about this opportunity to have an interview and have a talk with you. It really is okay. Think about what's next. And I would say to anybody who's listening, if you've been doing this a while and you're now in your 50s, you're now in your 60s, even if you're late 40s, think about what are you going to do after, because there comes a moment when you either become tired, or worse still, you can become irrelevant. And what I mean by irrelevant, you no longer have the ability to speak to the issues of the moment.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
you know
Man,
that happens.
that
Hmm.
that's spot on. That's some sage advice right there.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
My wife and I've had those conver
go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, my wife and I've had kind of similar conversations.
Hmm.
We still feel young. I think in your 50s, you're still
Yeah.
at that. You're
Oh yeah.
still trying to hold on,
Hmm.
but you also can see you
Hmm.
probably have a lot more past you
Oh yeah.
than you have in front of you.
Oh
So,
yeah.
are we still going to want to be doing this
Yeah.
in 5 years?
Yeah.
But you're right. It's also those things, Daryl, that for me, the past 5 or 10 years, it's just
Hmm.
been, when I first started doing this work, I
Hmm.
was out on campuses with the kids, throwing the football
Oh
around.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And I realize I can't do that now, because if I stand up for more than 20 minutes, my feet hurt. So, so it's like, what is my next role? I got to be decision making and
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah.
And it's like you say, in front of the cameras. I
Hmm.
would love to spend time with the kids. I miss
Yeah.
that, but yeah, after like 30 minutes, they
Oh yeah.
draw a lot of energy out of you when you
Well,
get to a
yeah,
certain
because
age.
when you think about it, for most of us who started this work, the hardest part is not being with the kids on a regular basis. And some people can't transition. That's why they can't be administrators or organization leaders. They can be within an organization trendsetters by what they do, but it's hard for them to maintain or elevate the organization to the next level because their real love is with the kids. Nothing wrong with that. And if that's what you have as a love, do that well. You don't have to be a principal. You don't have to be an administrator. You don't have to start a nonprofit. If you do well, simply serving the kids and having a drill team in place, having a cheerleader team in place, doing something directly with the kids, nothing wrong with that. Keep doing that. But recognize, for those of you who have talents and have an interest, the one thing that's going to change is your ability to have regular interaction with the kids at the level you once started off with. Because like you say, throwing the football is a beautiful thing, but it's funny. I used to, I go into a gym and I watch administrators or staff members doing things. This is a true story in the Salvation Army. I used to bar certain staff members from even going into the gym. They were good basketball players too. Oh no, you can't go in the gym. I won't call his name because everybody knows, he knows who he is. If he's listening, he'll know who it is. I tell him, you can't go in the gym. Oh no, you can't go in the gym. You cannot go in the gym. What? I said, yeah, you can tell it's hard everybody going in the gym. You can walk in the gym and walk out the gym, but you cannot go on the basketball court at all. Wear your shoes. That means you can't get on the court. Wear your shoes. Do not wear tennis shoes. And it was just because I was trying to say to him, yo, you're going to change and be an administrator, so you have to get away from being drawn into doing the basketball thing because that takes 35 minutes, an hour of your time because that's how you look at it. So rather than spending that 45 minutes, an hour on that, you need to spend 2 minutes waving at that, hitting the ball, throwing it to somebody and walking out. And the other 58 minutes, the other 43 minutes, whatever it is left, that's what you need to be doing, planning the league, planning the trip, planning how you're going to pay for the trip that Mr. Barber said, I'm not paying for that. You said you wanted to go to Vegas. How you going to pay for it? But that's what happened. That's how I learned. Because like I tell you, my CEO at the Salvation Army back in the day gave me a budget. This is your budget. Anything above that, brother, is your responsibility. But that's how I learned how to raise money. That's how I learned fundraising. That's how I continue to do it until today. That's my everyday thing, raising money, figuring out partnerships, what's next. We had a golf tournament yesterday, Demetrius, and right after golf tournament was over, I was thinking about next year's golf tournament. And how I can do something better to make it better me. But that's as an administrator, that's my responsibility to think about how we can do it better. And and literally that's how I thought. That's what I was thinking. But that's because I'm not thinking so much about playing golf yesterday. I'm not. People say, Daryl, you're not playing, bro. You're not gonna play. I said, nah, I might put once or twice. And if I go to a hole and somebody requires me to hit because they're by themselves, okay, I'm gonna hit a ball. But trust me, I'm just gonna hit one ball and I'm gonna get our first one not as good as I like to be. But more importantly, that's not my role anymore. So playing in a tournament that I'm a part of, no. If I want to go play in a tournament, I'll go do that somewhere else. I don't want no responsibility. Make you laugh. We used to organize concert series in Oak Park. Oak Park Summer Concert Series was that we used to do too. And when you're in it, I was in it. I was going to organize, so I had a responsibility from the beginning to the end. That was our responsibility. And we took pride on having no problems between the start of the concert and the end of the concert. Now, 1 hour later, what happened in the park? That was something else. It wasn't us. Wasn't no concert. Literally, that's how we thought. But I'll tell you, but if I wanted to go enjoy a concert, I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't enjoy it there. People don't understand that, but I couldn't necessarily enjoy it there. What I had to go to another place to enjoy the concert. So, that's on that. Sometimes I go and observe others doing the work. I go to football game to watch the game because as long as I'm not in the role to have to be Mr. Roberts and that focus about everything, and that's a little hard. That is truly hard. I can enjoy it, because if I go to the San Francisco game or I go to the Raider game, I go to the Kings game, or the Kings game a little different because in Sacramento, I unfortunately become
you're recognizable.
It's a different world, and I know I created it, so I'm going to accept it for what it is. But I go to other places to enjoy myself, and that's literally it. And I think one of your questions I saw was, how do I enjoy myself? I'm trying. I mean, I really am trying on finding ways to simply enjoy myself. Golf is an enjoyment, can be frustrating, but I do that. Resting sometimes is an enjoyment. I will tell somebody in a minute, what you do this weekend? Nothing.
Nothing.
I And you know, and I don't feel guilty not going to every
Nope.
place I used to go to every Saturday and every Sunday, being at all the spaces, 2 or 3 stops during the course of the day. I don't have a problem with that anymore. Demetrius not doing it. And if it
Yeah.
means that because I wasn't there, that it didn't work, then it wasn't working anyway. Please don't put
Right.
me on it. It worked without me being there. And I told you it was going to work. I know it's going to start on time. I didn't have to be there. And I really recognize that after a while, those of us as we get older, we got to know that. That's how you can
Yeah.
enjoy this life. Because if you get caught up in, I got to be at everything. I'm the party don't start till I get there. That's that mentality. Like, no, truthfully, that party's going to be fine without you.
It's gonna be fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
I appreciate hearing that, Daryl. I think one of the things for me as well, just as you get older, to your point, you're right. Just the weekends where I didn't do anything, or the weekends where something I wouldn't have really thought would be enjoyable, or maybe I did every so often when I was younger, but now I look forward, like going to Apple Hill
Yeah.
with my wife. Like, yeah, we just went to Apple Hill and walked around, had some pie, and that was the most relaxing weekend I've had in a couple. I didn't have to worry about work. You're right. It's finding those little things and spending time, and maybe a little quick trip to the coast or something is probably some of my best and most favorite weekends now.
And for us, I think we have to do, I know me and my wife have to do that more. You know, those
Yeah.
pieces. You know, we've never really been to Apple Hill to do that piece. We've been this close, and the kids go to Apple Hill, and we send them there a bit, but we haven't. So honestly, you know, you will probably might bust me up at Apple Hill one day.
Yeah.
Who not trying to see me? Hey, what's going on?
Trying to hide.
You know, we go.
It's just it's a fun little getaway. So,
Yeah.
man. Well, hey, Daryl, man, it's been a pleasure just
been a
getting to know you.
pleasure.
Like I've said, I've seen you in various spaces. I've seen you at speaking at meetings. It was and it was an incredible pleasure just to sit down and have some time to talk with you and learn more about you.
I appreciate you giving me the chance. Thanks to Rolanda also for making this available.
Yes.
But really, I appreciate that, and thank you for inviting me to participate. You know, anytime you want to have a brother involved, I don't have a problem doing it. Okay.
I sure will, and I look forward to speaking with you, and then maybe even being in some of the same spaces doing the work in the future.
Sound like one, brother. Take care of yourself.
Awesome. You too. Have a great weekend, Daryl.
Take care.